Hey, good afternoon or good morning or whatever time of day it is, good whatever time of day. Welcome again to one of our Vectric live events. I'm Todd, and if you've been here before, then you'll know what's about to happen is I am going to go through a project from start to finish live for you here with all of its good and bad when it comes to live things. So it should go really well. As you know, in the past, this is our third truly live event. We had been pre-recording a video and then answering questions based on those videos in the chat room. Well, now we've decided to do like the last three or last two and then this one events is to actually do a me live. I'll answer your questions that pertain to this particular project live here if I can. And also we have some of the Vectric staff, Rebecca, specifically in our chat room to help answer any other questions. And if we don't get to your questions, don't be upset. We do get a lot of them and end up scrolling by and we miss them. Just put them in the comments below and we'll get back to those as soon as we can. Okay, which will be soon enough. So just a little update on what's going on here. Vectric is still working from home across the board. We're all working in our own houses. On Sunday, we're supposed to get an announcement maybe on whether there'll be some relaxing of the social distancing that's we've been having for the last quite a long time now here in the UK. We're all looking forward to that to see what maybe things will change in the future for us, and we'll see how that goes. Hope everything is good for you guys and gals where you are. Hope everybody's keeping safe and still making. Okay, well, let's get into this. So today we are going to work on a project, what I call the barbecue board. I want to be straight up with you. I don't have a whole lot of experience with what kind of wood you would use for a good cutting board that's food safe or even really how to finish it. And I'm not going to give you that advice today. So if you have any good advice like that, please don't hesitate to put it in our chat room and in the chat feed, excuse me, because people will be asking that. So if you have some experience, whether it's maple or I don't know, whatever you happen to use, that would be great. I'm more or less speaking to the process of making a cutting board and how to make the channels in them specifically, okay? So first of all, let's talk about the standard cutting board. Everybody has one of these in their house, a butcher block, chopping block, whatever you call it. It's great, and typically you've had it for many, many years, and they're really great. We've got one here. My daughter and I have made a couple of them with maple in the middle with some strips of oak on the outside, and they are one of the things that we really truly enjoy using. This would be the kind of cutting board that I would see maybe when I was younger. My dad he called it a steak board. I don't know. Anyway, we'd have a piece of steak on it with a little pile of potato chips and the little trench or the channel around the outside kind of catches any of the juice that might come off the steak and keeps it off the table, which is kind of nice. And of course you see them you see them in this round variety as well, which is quite nice. I see these quite often on Instagram and Facebook and so on, and they're beautiful pieces in the end. But what I want to focus on today is how to make a chopping block or a chopping board that has some angled channels in it so that the juice from the meat or orange or whatever you're cutting on there, the fruit or vegetable, is going to run down the board into maybe a little dish or a bowl. In this case, like you see in that image there's a hole at the end and there's a little pan underneath it that catches the juice. And there's a couple of different ways we can do this. So we're going to focus on two different ways. And the first way is going to be what we call fluting. Okay, now I'm going to use the fluting toolpath to do this first example, and I think it works really quite well. But unfortunately, I don't have any wood around. So this example is going to be using a piece of wood that I found on the IKEA site. And we actually happen to have one right here, which is it in real life. I didn't actually have this until a couple days ago. So the process that you're going to see is if you didn't have this, what you could do to get the general shape and then develop your channels from that, and also figuring out how to draw a proper dish at the bottom to catch the juice. But one thing that is quite nice about the IKEA site is that it gives you all the information about the product, the dimensions of the product, the care instructions for it, and then also what it's made of, which is really, really kind of important and nice. So to look at the information that comes with this one, I know that I can probably use oil to retreat it after I've cut it, and also I can use that to season it over time and so on. Now, like I said, I didn't have anything to trace, and to trace that picture that you see in the top corner on an angle and get the right size would be kind of a challenge. So I did a little web search and I found this particular image here. And like I said, I had that before I had the board, and this looked at the time like it was going to be suitable, so we're going to continue with this particular size. Now, don't worry, you don't need the IKEA board because we've actually included in the profile vector on the outside so that you can cut it out of whatever material you decide. Okay, fair enough. So let's go off into the software. Now, I'm going to use VCarve Desktop for both of these demos. Of course, the tools that I'm going to use are available in VCarve Pro and also Aspire. So if you happen to have those, then you're off to the races, and that's great. I'm just going to take a quick look through the comments here. Hello to everybody that said hi. My volume. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I see one person having a problem. Sorry about that. Let me know if anybody else is. That would be great. And Robert, don't worry about being late. It's okay. Next time I see you. Yeah, that's great. Good stuff. Okay, perfect. So let's start off with this. The first thing I'm going to do is I am going to create a new file. And the size that we're given on the IKEA site is in centimeters. So I'm going to go ahead, this is going to be a single-sided job, and I'm going to start off with centimeters. So it's going to be 520 centimeters, and the width of it is going to be 220, and the thickness of it is going to be 18 millimeters. That's in millimeters. And thanks, Ollie, that's perfect. Thank you for confirming that. We're going to use millimeters for right now, but I'm going to switch over to inches in a little bit. We're going to zero off our material surface. My datum is set to the center. And because we're not using any 3D content, I can just leave it at a standard resolution, which is perfect. And of course, I'm going to choose Canadian Maple, and we're going to click OK. Now, this is set up for the size of the board, which that's just the way I started, but we'll get to that in a second. So I'm going to import in a bitmap, that bitmap that we saw that I found on the internet. So open that up. That's going to be imported directly into our software. Now I'm going to use the same process that you would have seen when I showed you how to make the pizza cutter box. This is a real-world object. It looks like they took it at a reasonable distance away. It looks like it's pretty straight. So we're going to go with this, and we're going to make it happen with this particular image. So what I'm going to do is I am going to draw a box around this object. And as soon as I let go of my mouse pointer, my bitmap is going to get a little lighter. So I'm going to fix that right away. I'm going to close this down, and I'm going to select the bitmap and right click on that. And I can choose object properties. And like I said, you've seen me do this before. We're going to turn that fading down to 0, and then we'll close that out. And now my bitmap won't fade when I off select it. So I'm going to select this rectangle again, and I'm going to press T on the keyboard for transform. And I'm just going to size that up so it touches the outside of this bitmap. I have to zoom in a little bit. There we go. And I'm just looking for something rough in the end, just so I can size this up to be the right size that I need. That's good there. I'll just scoot over here, and I'll zoom in over there. That's great. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now we're going to use this box to crop this bitmap. So if I have this vector box selected, and I hold down my shift key and I select the bitmap, I can use the crop bitmap tool. So I'm going to select that, and there we have that already cropped for me. Now what I can do is I can select both of those, press T on my keyboard, and if I have my link X and Y here connected, then what I can do is I can change the width of this to be the width of the real board, which is 520 millimeters, and I can click apply and close that down. Press F9 on my keyboard to center it, and now you'll see that that is pretty much the size that I need in the end. Now let's just go ahead and size this up a little bit, because the actual job space isn't large enough for me to create a whole lot of tooling in, and it's a little tight. So let's just, for more comfort, let's go ahead and make it a bit bigger. So we're going to go over to our job dimensions. Now this is where I can switch this to inches. Everything gets converted over to inches for me, and I can just go ahead and make these a little bit bigger. So let's make this 22 inches by 10 inches. And you can see that automatically in my 2D view, that extra width and height is added to my job space, and everything else looks perfect. Nothing else has changed, and I can click OK, and I can delete that outside vector. I don't need that anymore. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace this. So use the same thing. I'm just going to drop in some vector lines here. Drop those all around the outside. I'm only going to draw half of this and I'm going to flip it over. So that's great. So press escape to get rid of that. I'll reselect that vector. I'm going to go into node mode and I'm going to right click over top these spans and I'm going to choose Bezier from the drop down list. Or if I know the quick key for that, if I do that again, I right click on that, you'll see to Bezier, but it has B at the end. So if I go ahead and hover over that and press B, it'll automatically turn it to a Bezier for me. And I can just go and quickly drag these over top of my bitmap to try and trace that. And this shouldn't take too long at all. It's a pretty simple one to trace. I'll just kind of nudge those in like that. Just using my cursor keys to nudge those handles around a little bit, just to be a little closer. We'll grab this guy here and bring him out there. Well, if I hover over that node and right click, I can choose smooth. So that's S on the keyboard, and that'll smooth that up a little bit for me, and I can bring that into place. We'll do the same with this node, just press S over top of it. And there we go. I think that's pretty close to what it needs to be. So when you import in a bitmap, it automatically puts that bitmap on its own layer. So let's just go ahead and hide that. I don't need to see that anymore. And I can just go ahead and use what I have here. So that's great. Use my pick tool. I'm going to select that. Now, I need to flip it from top to bottom. There's a couple different ways you can do that. I can go ahead and use the mirror selected objects if I want to. So I can just go ahead and flip vertically about the center of the job and I can create a mirrored copy, which works out fine. Or what I can do is with that vector selected, I can hold down my control key, which means copy. While I'm holding that down, hold down my shift key, which means flip about the center. And then I can choose either V or H, whichever way I want to flip it, vertical or horizontal. And I want to press V and that'll flip it vertically. So there I have my copy. That's a super quick way of copying things across your job or up and down across your job. So we're going to hold down my shift key and we'll select both of those, right click, and we are going to join those together. We're just going to move our endpoints. We'll take one more look to make sure that it is joined at both ends. It is. So there we are. We have our vector outline and we're ready to go. Now to keep this nice and neat and tidy, I'm going to go ahead and put this on its own level, okay? Or its own layer, excuse me. So I'm going to, with that selected, I can right click and I can say move to a new layer. And we're going to call this IKEA board. And I'm going to make this orange, okay? And now you'll see that it's on its own layer and it's orange. And then I have 2 layers or 3 layers now at the bitmap, the layer that I'm working on, and then the IKEA board layer. And that's there in case you want to go ahead and cut it out of whatever material you'd like to use in the end. So that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. Now let's talk about, or let's start putting in some of the channels that we want to put in here. So to make life easy, what I've decided to do is use offset. I'm going to select this and I'm going to offset inwards 1 inch. And I'm going to leave off create sharp corners. I'm not going to delete my original. I'm going to make sure that I select my new one. So we're going to do that 3 times. There's 1, and because I have select new, my next one's already selected, 2, and then 3. And there we have it. There are all the channels that I'm going to use. Now, I'm not going to get too far into how I'm going to use those right now, but in a second we'll talk about the fluting toolpath and how that will use these lines, okay? Now at the end of this board, I want to put in a little dish shape to catch the juice that runs down the board. So to do that, I'm just going to simply just draw an oval somewhere around here. Apply that and close. You'll notice that I work really organically when I'm doing something like this. I'm not grabbing numbers from anywhere. I'm not doing anything like that. I'm just really just working with what I want it to look like. So that looks pretty good. I want my dish to make sure that these channels, the channels sort of stop or terminate inside of this dish. I want to make sure that it's tall enough so that it ends up touching that line for right now. And I think that's all right, but I need to make sure that I encompass this end of this in here. So if I go into node mode, I can just select these 2 control handles and I can just go ahead and drag those out to a point that they look good. Oops, grab this one and angle it a bit more. I'm pretty happy with that. Now, typically what I would do is I would go ahead and while I was doing that with my cursor keys, I would count the number of times that I pressed it. And I kind of forgot to do that. So we're gonna have to do the old cut the thing in half and flip it over and then restitch it together. Okay, so let's just go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to hover over top of these 2 end nodes, and what I can do is, if If I right click, I can choose cut out of that. So that's going to cut that vector there, and then right click, and I'm going to cut that vector there. Then I can delete this half, and I'm going to do the same thing we did a second ago, and I'm going to hold down my control, my shift, my V key, flip it over, hold down my shift key, grab both, right click, I'm going to join those, move endpoints, right click again just to make sure that it did seal up both ends, and it did perfect. So that's great. Okay, so I'm happy with that, and that looks pretty neat, I think, in the end. Now, one more thing I want to think about is that, and we hadn't talked about this much, so let's talk about it now, is that I'm going to be using the Fluting Toolpath, and I'm going to, the tool that is used in the Fluting Toolpath uses the vector as a center line. So I'm going to use a 1/4 inch ball nose end mill. Now, for all of you guys out there and girls that make chopping boards and so on, you probably have some big round fancy bits that you use for cutting these channels. I don't have those with me. I don't know what the dimensions would be. I did do a little research and look online, but I thought, you know what? I'm going to do what I know is right, and I'm going to use the tools that I know how to use and that we have on hand in the lab. So I'm just going to use a 1/4 inch ball nose end mill. Of course, you're able to go ahead and edit these files and change them to use whatever tool you like, whatever tool you feel is safe for your machine. And of course, we do want you to do that anyway in the end. So check over our tooling. I'll mention that a few times as we go through this, but check over the tooling. So I know I'm going to use a 1/4 inch end mill, so I'm running it down the center of this. Then what's going to happen is I'm going to end up having a little bit of a gouge here, because as it turns the corner, my dish isn't going to be able to, isn't going to follow the same line. So I have a couple options. I could overcut my dish, or what I could do is I'm going to just go ahead and offset that outside vector out 0.125, which is half the diameter of my tool. And I'm going to do that outwards. We're going to offset that. We're going to close that down. So that's going to be the outside of my my channel. And now what I can do, and I only did that really just to make sure that when I do this offset, that everything lines up okay, and I'm happy with that. And everything looks really good, I think. Everything will travel along there perfect. So let's delete that. And I'm going to go ahead and delete this guy. And we're going to use this dish here to pocket out my drip dish thing. I guess you call it a drip dish. I'm not really sure. But we'll go with that. Okay, so there we are. So now let's talk about how we're going to tool this. Let's bring up our tool paths and have a look. First of all, we always check our material setup. Everything here looks good. There is no 3D content. I'm going to start in the middle. My thickness hasn't changed. Nothing is different here, so we're going to click OK. And now we're going to have a look at the Fluting Toolpath. So to make that a little bit easier for you to see, because it's hard to see sometimes, and for those of you who haven't ever used the Fluting Toolpath, this will help you understand a bit more about it. Let's have a look at that. So this is the form for the Fluting Toolpath. The top and the bottom of that are pretty standard stuff. You should probably know what that is already. But the middle part is the part that we really want to focus on. Now, if my explanation here at this time still leaves you with some questions, at the very top of the form, there's a question mark that you can click, and that will bring up our help menu, which has some really good stuff in there and will help you or hopefully clarify some of the things I'm about to do. But we're going to see. Okay, so you have 3 different fluting types, and you also have 2 different ramp types. Let's go through the ramp or the flute types to start with. It seems logical, right? So we have ramp over the complete length. So it's going to take the start point of my vector and the end point, and it's going to ramp from the top of that to the bottom of that, the flute depth that I want it to be, right? So if I tell it it's going to be a 1/4 inch, it's going to start at 0 and it's going down a 1/4 inch. Or if I tell it to start at 0.1 and go down to a 1/4 inch, then it's going to go down to 0.35, right? Makes sense. Okay, one straight line or one angled line. So ramp at start and end. So if I click that, then what will happen is the box's ramp length and ramp percentage will be available for me. So I can choose how far I want the first bit of that ramp to be, or I can choose like a distance like 2 inches, 3 inches, 25 centimeters, whatever it happens to be, or I can tell it a percentage of that vector that I want it to go down. So that makes it, and then it's going to bottom out and go on the bottom when it hits that distance or that percentage, and it's going to travel along. And then there's the third option, which is ramp at start and at end. So it's going to go from your start point, it's going to ramp down, it's going to maybe do a flat bottom if you'd like it to be, and then it's going to go back up again. So again, that ramp length or the percentage is going to be at the front and the end of that, the tail, okay? Makes sense? And then we have the ramp type, which is either linear or smooth. So it's either going to be a straight line like that, or it's going to be a nice kind of smooth dip down. So that's pretty much it. It's not really all that super complicated, but certainly knowing that little bit of explanation or a little bit of extra information, I hope that helps out. So let's go back to the software and see how we're going to use that to help us develop the channels for this, okay? Oh, me on and off there, look at that. Okay, so let's start off with our vectors. Now we're going to choose these 3 vectors. Holding down my shift key, I can choose all 3 of them. Now, there's one thing that I forgot to do that I would like to go back and do. It's more of an aesthetic thing, but I think it's going to be important in the end. So we're going to close this down for a second. I didn't like these little sharp corners here, so I want to flute these a bit. I want to make these a little bit, not flute them, I want to fillet them. I've got fluting on the mind. I'm going to fillet these a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my fillet tool. I'm going to change this to be a 1/4 inch, and I'm just going to hover over that corner point, and I'm going to round those over a little bit. Just aesthetically, that looks much better for me. Sorry about that, but I wanted to correct that little mistake that I had made. Let's go back to our fluting toolpath again, and we'll hold down my shift key and we'll select those 3 lines. Now, straight away, you're going to see that the start points, that's the green points on here, are not centered. So what I want to have happen is for my start point to be here, and for it to start to flute down all the way to the bottom to here, and then start fluting back up again to the top again. So I need to make sure that my start points are all at the very top. So let's go into node mode, and I can just hover over top. Now I'm lucky that I have 3 nodes here at the top of those vectors. If they're not there, you may need to insert one in, which is easy to do. Just hover over the line and press I, or if you forget that, right click and there's insert point right there. But what we want to do right now is I want to hover over top of that node, right click on that, and make that my start point. Now as you can see, I could hover over that and just press P, which is really quite fast to do. And there I've got all of my start points lined up so that my fluting will work fine. It looks great. Let's go back to my pick tool. They look great. Happy with that, and all of those nodes are lined up perfectly. And I'm going to start our first sort of demonstration. I'm going to start at 0, and we're going to flute down to a 1/4 inch deep. I'm going to use my ball nose end mill. And these are just the tools that are set up in the tool database. I haven't gone in and modified these at all. So definitely you're going to need to go in if you choose to download and cut these to actually change them to fit your CNC machine, the tools you have on hand, and the material you're cutting into. So definitely make sure that you could check these all, okay? But I'm just going to go with that 1/4 inch ball nose end mill. I'm going to ramp from the start to the end. I'm going to do 100% ramp. And we're going to use a linear ramp type. I'm not going to worry about use my vector selection order, or I'm not going to project it onto a 3D model because there isn't any there. And we're going to calculate that, and we'll have a look at what I've got. So you see, as I turn it up on its edge, now it's kind of hard to see, but at this end, you can see where the tool paths come together, and at this end, they're split apart. So they get deeper as they go along the way. Now, if you can't see that very well, I'm going to show you. And this is another little top tip. If it's hard to see your tooling, you can just go up here to View and turn off your color shaded view and zoom out, and you'll see that there they are without the material block in the way. But if I do want to see the vector representation of my material block, I can turn it on, and that way I can see what's going on. Now, if I roll up on my edge here, you'll see what is happening is that I'm actually going from here and I'm going down. And so at this end where the trough is, where not the trough, but the drip tray is, it's going to be deeper than at the top end. So let's go ahead and turn that off again, go back and turn back on our color shaded view. And let's preview that toolpath and see what happens. So that's exactly what I expected to have happen. It's starting at 0 and it's fluting around to the bottom, and then it's coming all the way back up again. So at the bottom of this is a 1/4 inch deep, and at the top of it, it's at my material surface. There's some problems with this because I don't want the top of my board to look like that. So to correct that, what we're going to do, we're going to open up our toolpath again, and we're going to give this a start depth instead. So 0.1, and then we're going to go down to, if I went down to 0.25, then what's going to happen is I'm actually going to get a 0.35 end here. So I don't want that. I just want to go down to 0.15. So that those two added together are going to be 1/4 inch deep. It looks great. Same thing set up, and we're going to change this to be a channel flute. And we'll calculate that now. We'll reset our preview, and then we'll preview our visible toolpaths. And there we have it. So I'm starting out a little bit depth at the top, going down to the full depth at the bottom. And now what I can do is I can tile my view. We can click on that vector at the bottom, and we can pocket that out. So we're going to go down, start at 0, go down 1/4 inch. We're going to use a 1/4 inch ball nose end mill. Now, I'm going to show you here how to use the larger area clearance tool. In the next demonstration, I'm not going to focus too much on that because I'm going to do it here, but also it ends up in the next demonstration, makes my tooling really long, a lot of tool paths. And so just to kind of keep everything compressed down, I'm not going to use it in the next demonstration, but in this one, I will show it to you so that if you choose to use it in the next project or the next cutting board, then you can go for it, okay? So what it's going to do is it's going to use this large end mill, which has a really large step over to clean out the middle of this, and then it's going to go back in and clean up the edges with this ball nose end mill. It's going to round them out like everything else. So that's what this is going to do with those two options. Also, this one toolpath dialog is going to net me, or going to give me 2 different tool paths, and we'll take a look at those in a second. We're going to use an offset strategy, which makes sense for a shape like this. It doesn't matter if you use raster or offset. I just like the raster look. I think that if there's any tooling marks in the bottom, they're going to be in a it's going to look nice. At least it'll be around in a circle, not back and forth. We're not going to worry about ramp plunges, no pocket allowance. We're not going to project it, and we're going to go and call this drip dish. Sure, drip dish pocket. And then we'll calculate that. Then we'll preview that visible tool. Oh, here we go. So at the bottom here, you've got the 2 tool paths. This is the clear tool path. This is the one that uses the 1/4 inch end mill. And the one below it is the one that uses the 1/4 inch ball nose. So I can, when you see them, we'll do them one at a time. We'll go ahead and show you the clearance tool. So let's preview that. It's going to go in and clean that up nicely. Then we're going to go back in and do the ball nose. And there we have it. Now, of course, the drawback to that is that there is a tool change required, but we need a tool change anyway if you're going to cut this out of your own material. So let's just go ahead now and use this outside vector to create a profile to cut this out with. So we're going to start at 0. We're going to go down to a cut depth of the thickness of our material, which if you don't remember what that is, which I didn't, because remember I had set this up to be millimeters, switched it to inches, so I don't recall what the inches conversion is for 18 millimeters. So if I put in Z in there, and then I'm going to add to that 0.02, which is going to cut a little bit deeper into my spoil board, but that's okay. I'm not too worried about that. We're not going to use a ball nose end mill. We're going to go ahead and select a standard old end mill. We're going to go outside that line. We're no allowance. We're not going to do any separate last pass. We're not going to add any tabs in, but of course, depending on your hold down method, you might want those. It's just a demonstration, so I'm not going to show you the tabs. We don't need any of the ramps or anything like that. That's all good. And we are just going to call this cutout profile. And we'll calculate that. And it's going to tell us that of course we're going to cut through our material, which is great. Good warning. We will preview that visible tool path, and then we're going to double click on that. And there we have our end cutting board. So that's the first technique. And I think it works really, really good. And I suspect that people use this all the time to make their cutting boards with. But also people though use it for other things too. The fluting toolpath can be used for pillar details or decorative lines on, I've seen Michael Taylor use these before for use these for doing some interesting little added details to his projects. We have a demo, if you look at the fluting toolpath guide on our website, and there'll be a link below in the description for this video, you'll see how you can use it to make a seat for a chair. And Becky showed us at a user group meeting, I believe it was, I'm not sure if it was the last one or the one before, how to make a bowl using the fluting toolpath. So it's a pretty universal tool, but in this case, it does what it does. And also in that fluting toolpath guide, it does show you how to make a different cutting board using the fluting toolpath. So you're going to get 3 times the amount of information you probably need for making cutting boards. Okay, fine. So now this particular way of doing it kind of falls apart a bit when you want to do something like this, where we have different channels that need to run into a channel at different angles and so on. To figure out the depths of those, the ends of those is a bit of a it can be done, a bit of a challenge. It can do it, but I'm going to show you a way that you can do it using an interesting technique, using a zero plane. Now I want to again tell you that I haven't cut this, so this is just the process. This is the theory behind it. And when we get back to the labs, I promise that we will cut all of these projects, or at least the majority of them, and we'll see whether they're okay or not and make any different changes we need to. But I think it looks safe and so on. So we're going to go ahead with it. But again, take a look at the tool paths and make sure they're safe and appropriate, the feeds and speeds for your machine. Okay, don't go by with what I set up. I'm just talking about the theory of creating the actual angled channels. Okay, so let's go ahead and show you how to make a barbecue board. Now, again, what I've done is I've gone to IKEA and I found a board that I think would work. Similar to this board over here, which I happen to have kicking around. But the thing is, the important bit is they've put a hole in it for me. I guess to hang up. I'm really not quite sure why, but anyway, to hang up. So we need to figure out a way to not only go with the dimensions, but figure out where that hole is in our board so we can avoid it. Okay? Now, of course, like I said to you before, on the IKEA site, there's all kinds of information about that particular board that we have. So we've got the dimensions, we have what it's made of, how to keep care of it. In this case, it's made of ACA. I don't know how to say that, and it says wax next to it. But up above it, it says that you can hand wash only and re-season it with oil. So I think that I'm assuming that once we cut this, then you can go ahead and season it with whatever you use on your cutting boards at home. I've got a special stuff that I bought that I use here for our cutting boards. Some people make their own beeswax finish, but you can buy it out there anyway. So to trace it, all I could find, again, because I need to find out where the hole is in this thing, was this image that IKEA put on their site. So I'm hoping to be able to use this and get close enough that I can avoid the hole in the board. Now the board I'm going to look at is the part that's not blurred there, and this is what I'm going to use to size up what I need to do. So to do that, what we're going to do is go back to the software, and I'm going to start a brand new job. I'm not going to save that one off. And in this case, it's going to be a single-sided job again, but the dimensions of the board are a bit different. So the width of this is going to be 500 millimeters, and the height of it is going to be 300, and the thickness is going to be 30. So it's quite a bit thicker than before. And we're going to do everything the same. We're going to zero off our material surface. We're going to start in the center. We're going to use a standard resolution because, again, there's no 3D content. And we're going to use the Canadian maple and press OK. Now, this is the size of our board. So what's kind of nice about this, instead of me making a rectangle, just an arbitrary rectangle, I'm going to bring in that bitmap because we need to actually get that trace, don't we? So let's select that, open that up. Now, here it is, and we need to rotate this around. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and I'm going to press 9 on the keyboard, and that's going to rotate this 45 degrees for me. And there we have it twice, and I've got it the right way I want it to be. So here we go. That's great. So now what we're going to do is we are going to draw a box again around that board. Now, I don't know how far in the board is behind that other board that it's setting behind. So I'm going to draw a box, and I'm not going to worry about it because really all I need is the length of it. And I can see where it sits on the actual countertop. So if I take a box and I draw it, I just make sure that I get the bottom of it lined up and the top of it lined up. Close. Again, we're going to select that, and we are going to go into our object properties and turn that fading down and press close. And here we go. And we're going to pull that up just a little bit. We'll zoom in a little bit and make sure that we get the bottom of that. Perfect. We're going to use that vector to shift, and we're going to select that bitmap, and we're going to crop it again. And there we have what we need. Now, this workspace is exactly the size that I need. So if I just grab this and I click it to the bottom, and I size this up to there so the bottom touches, then that should be approximately right for what I need. Now I can go ahead and draw in my circle where it belongs. Close that down, use my cursor keys to nudge it into place. And then we're going to delete that bitmap and delete that out of the way. Now, I'm going to check to see if these dimensions seem plausible. So if I click that and I press T on the keyboard, it's in millimeters. So that's not going to help me any. I'm going to see if it's inches. So I want like to be in inches. So we're going to do the same thing we did a minute ago. Flip it over to inches. And we're going to say OK. Now if we select that and press T, we're going to see it's about 1¼ inches. And I think that seems plausible for a hole that IKEA might put in one of their boards. So we're going to go with that. And I'm pretty happy with that. And it does sit nicely on that horizontal line there. So that's a good position for it. Now I'm just going to check for any questions that we have. If you have to cut a flute in several passes because of the depth, it will make each cut full length and sloping, or do you guess? No, it does the full length. So there you go. That's your answer right there. It does the full length again, and off you go. Oh, I got some information about that wood. Commonly known as wattles, or, oh, I still can't say that word. Right. In Africa or Australia. Perfect. Okay, great. Well, there you have it. So that's good. So what we're going to do now is start to talk about how we're going to build this barbecue board. Now I need an outline around this, so I'm going to go ahead and create an outline. And seeing as this, again, this workspace, this job space is the same size of my board, it'll snap to the corners for me. And now I got snap there and I snap there. If it doesn't snap for you, that's because you don't have your smart snapping turned on. Make sure that's turned on, and we'll close that down. Let's go ahead and make our job a little bit bigger. Again, 22 by 13. Everything else stays the same. I click OK. Now I'm going to move these like I did with the last example. We're going to select both of those vectors, right click on those, and we're going to move those to a new layer. And we're going to call this IKEA board. And we're going to choose a random color to be orange. Click OK. And now they're sitting on their own layer. So again, if you want to cut this out of your own block of material and don't have the cutting board on hand, then you can go ahead. You've got those vectors to do that with. So that's great. Now, like I had mentioned before, is I do this kind of organically. So this first box I'm going to create, I just came up with it and it happened to be a good size. So I don't have a good explanation of why I chose this size. So sorry, I really don't have any good explanation. It just seems to look good. So there we go. So I'm going to create a box, and this box is going to be about like that. But we're going to make this 13 inches across by 9 inches high. And we're going to click apply and close that down. Okay, so what this vector represents is the outside of the channel that we're going to create. So I'm going to offset this vector box inwards, half of the diameter of that 1/4 inch ball nose end mill that I'm going to use. So we're going to go inwards this. We're going to create sharp corners. That's the right distance. Offset that in and close that down. Okay, so this is the line that I'm going to use for, I'm not going to use a fluting toolpath this time around. We're going to use a profile cut instead with the ball nose. When we create this board the first time, it's going to have flat channels in it. It's not going to be angled any. And to be honest, and I'll mention it again later, this is perfectly fine that way. So if you don't want to go through if you don't want to worry about the angling and so on of everything, you just want to create a nice flat cutting board, then this will be fine in the end. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So that's good. Now what we want to do is, in my cutting board, I want the channels to look like a grill. I think that would look really quite nice. So to do that, what I'm going to do is drop in a vector line here from that top to here. I'm going to press escape to close that down. Then I'm going to use our array copy tool, or array copy tool here. And I'm going to create, I want 5 lines in the middle, but I need 2 extras on the outside. So I'm going to say 7, okay? And it's going to, oh, sorry, no, it's going to be 1 column, 7 rows? No, I want, yeah, that's right, okay, exactly. 1 row, 7 columns. And I want these to all be positive numbers. It's great, and we're going to create copy, and we're going to close that down. I'm not worried about the space between these right now. That's not important, because I'm going to go ahead and select that, and I'm going to stretch it out. And it's going to snap onto that far right part of that box. And now what I've got is these all evenly spaced inside that rectangle, and I can delete out these end ones. Okay, I'm going to do the same from top to bottom. So we're going to draw a line here, and I'm going to go across to there. Press escape. I'm going to use the same array copy tool, except for I'm going to make this, I want 3 lines across. So I'm going to make this 5 rows and 1 column. And I'm going to show you a little trick here. We're going to go ahead and copy these like this, but you'll see what happens. It copies them up because I'm telling it the gaps are positive here. So if I undo that and I choose to put negative in here, and I go ahead and copy that, you'll see that it copies down, which is really what I want to do. We'll close that, reselect it, and we're going to drag that down to there, and it's going to snap to that bottom line of that rectangle, and I can go ahead now and delete those top 2. And that looks pretty good. Now, just as a little safety thing, I do this quite often, is I'm going to copy all of this that we just did onto its own layer and just hide it away in case something goes terribly wrong. So I'm going to select all that, right click, and I'm going to copy to a new layer, and we're going to call this working. And I'm going to pick a random color, as green will be fine, and press OK. And then I'm going to go up here and I'm going to turn off working. And so I've got a safe copy here on this working layer, so that if anything goes terribly wrong, I can go back and fix it. Okay, so far so good. Now we need to put, I would like to put some lettering in here, and I want to make it look like it's, I don't know if you've been to a steakhouse before and they've got the big grill stamps on the top of the steak when you get it, or at least in the advertisements they do. It never looks like what it really is when you get it. But anyway, so I'm going to put in some text. In this case, I'm going to type in BBQ, and I'm going to use Berlin Sans FB. Just a random font. There's no specific reason why I picked that one, except for it looks big and bold, and it looks like it might be a nice barbecue font. That is really a subjective thing, but I like the way it looks, so we're going to go with that. We're not going to bold it. If I did choose bold, it gets really crazy, so I don't want bold, not italics. We're going to text alignment is center, it really doesn't matter. The text height, well, again, I'm going to be totally upfront with you. That's just the way it worked out. There was no plan there. I just sized up a few of them, and 3 inches seemed to be a good size for me. So again, if you change the text, maybe you're going to put the word grill in there instead, or maybe dad or mom or whatever you want in there, then you're going to need to make sure that you just check the size. And I'll show you some things you're going to want to look out for within the next few steps here. So it's just a good little thing to remember. Okay, so we've got that. That all looks good, and we're just going to say close. And then I'm going to center this inside of this box. So if I select the text, hold down my shift key and select this box here, then I can go ahead and use our align selected objects. And the ones that I'm going to be focusing on are right here. Align to selection, not to my material, but to my selection. I want it to center the BBQ inside of that box, top, bottom, left, and right. If I click that, that's great. And I can go close, and there we have it. So that looks great. So now what I think I want to have happen is for the channel to be outside of my letters, okay? And then the letters to actually be raised wood. So to do that, I'm going to offset these letters outwards. So offset those outwards. In this case, I could go the 1/4 inch bullnose diameter if I wanted to, but I think I'm going to go a little bit wider because I think it would look better if it was thick, a little bit thicker than that. The channels around this were a little bit thicker than the actual channels. I think that would be kind of nice. So we're going to go 0.3 of an inch. And we're going to go outwards. And that's, we don't want sharp corners. We don't want to delete the original, and we'll select the new. That's great. Let's close this down. And the only thing we're going to change is I'm going to delete this little guy right there. There's a little bit of an extra vector there I don't want. He doesn't need to be there. That looks pretty good. And now I want to do something that, again, is very subjective here. I want to center this a bit better. Right now, because the Q has the little dangly Q line, that's probably a proper name for that thing, but it's dangling there. It's making everything kind of off center. So I want to move it down and center that in between, in the middle of my actual grill that I'm making, and then go on to the next step after that. So we're going to select all of that, and I'm going to use my cursor keys to nudge it down so that visually, and actually I'm going to pay attention to what's going on here in the middle I'm just going to line this up like that to the middle. And I think that's going to be a better option in the end. Now, the next thing I want to look at is that the channels, as they come into this channel here around the outside of the B, I need it to stop someplace, because if it continues on, then it could hit something. Like for instance, if I went ahead and did a profile cut down here, I'm going to end up severing my B, and I don't want that to happen. So I need to trim those off, and also I want them to terminate right in the center of this channel that we're going to create here. So to do that, I'm going to take the BBQ again, and we're going to offset that half of this distance. Okay, that will give me the center of my channel that's going to be there. So we'll make that 1.5, and we are going to offset that outwards. We'll close that down, and that's great. Okay, now what we want to do is take a look at where these lines are going to line up. And we might want to just kind of wiggle the barbecue around just to fit a little better. What I'd like to do is I'd like to trim off these vectors to match up perfectly. So if I grab everything that's here, and again, and use my cursor keys and maybe just nudge it over a little bit. That looks good there. Let's just check the other end out. That's not too bad. But to fix that, I can just cheat a little bit. I'm just going to pull that out a little bit. There we go. And have that line up where I want it to be. At least closer to there. Anyway. There we go. Okay, so that's better. And that looks pretty good. Yeah, I'm happy with all of that. So now we are almost done with that extra set of lines that we created. But let's go get those. We're going to select those. Because I don't really want to lose them, because they might come in handy later if something, again, goes terribly wrong. So let's just select all those. Right-click, and we're going to move those to that working layer. And there we have it. So we have in the end. I need to turn that back on again, the working layer, for a second. And we're going to go ahead now and, oh shoot, you know what? I'm going to undo that for a second. I kind of made a little mistake there. So let's turn off the working one again. See, we make mistakes too all the time. Anybody who thinks that we don't is wrong. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Before I do that, what I need to do is I need to trim these lines that are going across here all over the place. So let's go to our interactive trim tool. And we are going to snip them off. So I want to snip these lines off just after they hit the center line there. So that one there. That one I'm going to do manually because it doesn't quite work out perfect. This one here I'm going to snip there. This one here the cross one I'm going to snip there. This guy I want to snip there. This one I want to snip there. That's good. That's good. That one we're going to snip. I think I'm just going to leave that one. It can go right through the center there. It's going to line up perfectly with the center of that. So that's actually not a bad thing. That's good there. And I believe that's everything. Yep, perfect. So let's close that down. Let's delete out these extra ones, these extra bits we don't need anymore. Yep, just checking all that. And then we're going to fix this one right here. So I'm going to go into node mode, and I'm going to insert in a node here, and I'm going to cut it. And I'm going to do the same down here. Select that vector, insert a node, and I'm going to cut it there. And then we're going to just select that middle piece, and we're going to delete that out of there. We don't need that. Okay, I think that is pretty good. Now, again, the amount of work you're going to need to do with that if you decide to change the text will depend on the font, where things kind of land, and so on. So you might need to take a really close look. And the way I found out where to snip these was actually to preview my tooling, and I decided that I didn't like the way it looked, so I went back and I figured out a way to do it and have them terminate in the right spot that I wanted them to be. So that looks okay. I'm pretty good with all that, and we're good to go. Now, the next thing we're going to do, now this is not lined up where I want it to be on my board at all. This is just roughly where I think it might go. We need a box at the bottom here, or somewheres for a drip tray for these things to drip into. So let's grab a box, and we're just going to draw one about like that. And we're going to make it 12 inches across by 1.25 inches. Again, I'm just throwing in numbers that look good. Apply that, and we'll close that down. And that looks great. Now let's just work on the centering. So I want all of this to be centered this way inside of my board. So we're going to grab all of that, And we are going to nudge it up just where it belongs. I think it looks pretty good right there, actually. That worked out well. Great. Now I'm going to round the corners of these. So to do that, I'm going to use my fillet tool, and I'm just going to fillet these a 1/4 inch. That's not quite enough. I don't think a 1/4 inch is enough in this case. So you'll see that, now maybe you didn't see that, but if I hover over top of this corner here, and if I can fillet that, there's a little check mark that shows up below my fillet tool. If I click that, then it fillets it. And you'll notice that if I hover over that line, I can undo a fillet as well. So I can click that and undo that fillet. So let's undo those two fillets. And I want to make these 1/2 inch fillets instead, like this and like that. Let's see, oh, that looks much better. Kind of matches the roundness of my text that I have going on there. And then also I want to fillet this one there and the inside of my grill shape lattice going on there. And that looks great. Let's close that down. And then we're off. Perfect. Okay. I like that. Now in my design, before I start doing any tooling, I think that I should add in a couple handles to the end here. So I'm carrying this to my barbecue. I've got a place to kind of grip it with my thumbs. So let's draw a box. Now if I draw a box and I want it to start drawing from where I click and draw outwards, I can hold down my shift key and you'll see that as I drag up, I'm getting a shape that grows from the top and the bottom both. Make it about 1 inch thick. That's probably pretty good right there, maybe a little shorter. Right there's good. Let's close that down. Let's go back to my filleting again, and we're just gonna nip those off there. And that looks great, like that. Perfect. Now I wanna copy that across my, my job again. So again, we're gonna do the old Control, Shift, and H, and over it goes. That's great. Now I've got some extra space here. Might be a good spot to put a couple circles, a couple dish shapes maybe for some condiments or some dishes to put my onions in or my sauces in, whatever I'm going to do. So we're going to draw a circle here, and we're going to make it about, I don't know, 3.75. Apply that, close that down. I'm just going to eyeball that into place there. Looks all right. And we're going to go Control Shift, and this time I'm going to do V on the keyboard. So it's going to flip it over the center line down. And there we have that. So we're going to have those two spots there. And then we're going to create one more right here in the center. And this is going to be a 2 inch circle. Again, I don't know why I chose 2 inch. I didn't measure anything in my house, but maybe if you've got little dishes, you've got a smaller one that you can put there if you would like. And off you go. Now, I'm just going to look this all over and make sure that everything is kind of centered properly. I'm just going to eyeball this in there, but I think it's pretty close. So let's just make sure. I think that this distance here looks good to there. I could measure it, but I think it looks really nice. I think I'm happy with that. The outside distance looks good. And again, that's why I left this box here, because I know that this box will be the outside of that channel. So I know that I'm really looking at this distance, not the distance between this line and the outside, but this line here and the outside. That looks really great. I might actually just grab these two circles and just nudge them over to there. That looks a little better. Okay, perfect. So there we go. Now we're ready to go ahead and start to develop the tooling for this. So let's bring up our Toolpath tab. We're going to go ahead and tile our view. And here we go. So let's start off with what we're going to do. Let me just take a look back and see if there's any questions that I might need to look into. Looks like Rebecca's doing a great job. All the Vectric team, thank you guys for taking that on. Yeah, that's great. Well, hello to everybody who said hi. I think everything's been answered there. And again, if not, we'll get to you later in the comments below. Okay, let's have a quick drink. Okay, so let's go ahead and create the tooling for this. Turn me off there. So what we're going to do is, wow, it's almost been an hour already. Holy cow. Okay, flying along. So let's start off by looking at the actual vectors for making our channels here. We're going to select all those here that we need. Just select all those. Okay, might as well group those up. There we go, all grouped up for us. And now what we can do is go ahead and create our profiles. So we're going to start at 0, and we're going to go down a 1/4 inch deep. We're going to use a ball nose end mill. Again, I'm just using the ones that are in the tool database. They're not, they haven't been checked for feeds and speeds, so make sure you check all that stuff. We're going to go on the line. We're not going to do any separate last pass. We don't need to add any of that in. Go ahead and call this channel profile. And we're going to calculate that. And then we'll preview that visible tool path. And that's what I expected to have, so that looks great. Oh, but now seeing that, I noticed I forgot one little step. And I'm sure that somebody out there has noticed this. How is the juice going to get from here into here? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to ungroup those vectors again. Good thing I'm going to, because I noticed I missed one there. So we're going to grab this guy, this one, and this one, and this one. And if I go into node mode, I can go ahead and just grab all those vectors at the bottom. Those nodes at the bottom, excuse me, and I can use my nudge key and just nudge them down to the bottom there. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that again. I'm going to fix that up. Again, the previewing your tool paths is important to make sure that you get exactly what you expect to have happen. Okay. So we'll group those up. Let's just go ahead and recalculate that tool path, choosing that group of vectors instead. Let's calculate that. Then we can reset our preview and we'll preview those visible tool paths. That looks great. Oh, look at that. We need the outline one, the outside one too. So let's just go back into that again. Recalculate that. Preview that. There we go. Add that one in. Wonderful. Whew. Okay. Now let's go back to our tiled view again and let's look at our barbecue vectors we need. We don't need these ones anymore, so we're going to delete those out of there. Those are the ones that I copied and it didn't need them in the end. So that's great. That's what we need. Don't need this one. Great. Let's grab all of that and we're going to do the same thing again. But this time we're going to use a pocket. Instead, we're going to pocket that down 1/4 inch. We're going to use our ball nose end mill. We're not going to use the large clearance area tool. Okay. We're just going to use offset tooling. That all looks fine. And we're going to call this BBQ pocket. And we will calculate that and we'll preview that visible tool path. And there we have all those drains hit nicely. They're all sort of terminate in the center of that, which all looks really nice. Yes, and those out there, you'll notice that I didn't put any channels to drain these center bits here. And that's okay. I felt that what they would hold wouldn't be all that much. And if you wanted to do that, you could add those in on your own. So I did realize that, but decided not to change that or update the look. I like the way it looks right there. Now, let's close that down. Let's now go ahead and cut our drip tray here. So that's on a pocket tool path again, starting at 0, going down 1/4 inch, ball nose end mill, 1/4 inch ball nose end mill. Here might be one of those opportunities where you might want to use that larger larger area clearance tool. We're going to use offsets, the offset strategy. Sorry, lost my train of thought. And all this we don't need to worry about, and we're just going to call this drip dish, drip tray, drip catch, that works, pocket. And we will go ahead and calculate that and we'll preview that visible tool path. And there we have it, that looks great. Let's close that down. Now, all of these here are using the same tool and going to go down the same depth. So we're going to create one tool path for all of those. In the file that you get, that's not the way I've done it, but just because I'm running out of time, we're going to do that. So we're going to select that. We're going to pocket down 1/4 inch. Again, using that ball nose end mill. You may want to use this larger area clearance tool because there are some pretty big areas here. And you're going to save a lot of time with the step over of that. Using just a plain old 1/4 inch end mill, the step over will be much more aggressive, so it'll be much faster. Offset tooling, all that looks great. And we're going to call this circle. Oh, sorry. Circle pockets, and we will calculate that and we'll preview all of that in one throw. And that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. And now two more tool paths, and then we'll get on to actually the meat and potatoes of this, is how to angle all these channels. Sorry about that, it's taking a while to get there. So we're going to create the hole here, the IKEA hole. It's going to be a pocket. We're going to go down Z plus 0.02. Press equals on the keyboard to give me what that is. We're going to use an end mill for that. offsetting. We're just gonna remove all that material out of there. Just gonna turn it to dust. We're gonna call this IKEA hole pocket. Calculate that. And it's gonna tell me that I'm cutting through my material, and that's fine. I'm just gonna say okay. Let's preview that visible toolpath. And the last one is gonna be this outside profile cutout. Same thing, we're gonna start depth of, we're gonna go all the way down through that. So start depth of 0, we're gonna go Z plus 0.02. We're gonna use the end mill for that. Select that. And then we are gonna go ahead and, that's great, we're gonna go outside that line. That's all. And if you want to add in tabs and so on, you should probably do that again, depending on the hold down method you have. In my case, I'm going to be using the board, so the board will be there and I won't need to run this toolpath anyway. And we're going to call this cutout. Profile. We'll calculate that. And yep, we're going to go ahead and do that. Preview that. And we're going to double click on that. So there we go. So now I just saw a question pop up that, don't you think the drip tray pockets should be deeper? Well, you're right. It could be a little deeper if you'd like, but even if it was a little bit deeper, these channels aren't angled any, so you'd have to actually probably tilt it by hand to get all the juice to drip into there. So I'm going to show you now how to do that, but you can change the pocket depth of any of these if you'd like to. If you're not happy with the depths that I've sort of chosen or roughed in for you, that's the beauty of these free projects, is you can do whatever you'd like to do with them. So just, yeah, it's great. It's a great starting point anyway. And hey, you know what? I really feel that if you can make them better, and you do make them better, if you post those in the forum, that would be fantastic. So we can see what you've done and how you did make them better. And other users will take that knowledge and maybe build on theirs as well, which is really great. So as I said, this as it stands right now is a perfectly fine cutting board. And I think it looks quite nice. But now, what could we do to angle these channels here to make everything sort of drip into the tray? Well, we can't use the fluting toolpath because the way these intersect and everything, it would be a lot of work to get this to work. And I don't think you'd get the BBQ to even work properly, so that wouldn't be the way to do it. So what we're going to do is we are going to create an angled surface to project all of these toolpaths that need to drain onto. And we're going to make use of, so I'm going to choose this channel profile here, and I'm going to look at that toolpath. And at the very bottom of this, you'll see that it says project toolpath onto 3D model. So if we had a 3D model of, like, maybe in your clip art that was a wedge, you could use that. Or anything that was flat, you could tilt. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use a feature of our software, and we're going to create a tilted zero plane. Okay, so let's close this. Let me know if I disconnect at some point and you miss something. Once you catch up with me. I'll just wait a second until somebody answers me. I know it might be a little bit of a delay, but we'll see. Just let me know. Anybody? Oh, good. Okay, perfect. Excellent. Okay, great. So you heard that, so that's great. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Oh, good. Excellent. Perfect. Wonderful. Okay, great. Thank you for that, guys. Whew. I just saw a big warning pop up. Never had that happen before. A little panicky here. Okay, so let's talk about how we can go ahead and tilt these. That's perfect. Okay, so let's turn me off. You don't need to see me. And we are going to go now and unpin this. Actually, we're going to reset our preview. And we are going to close that and put that away. And we're going to go to our 2D view. Now, so right now, if we go to our modeling tab, we can add in a zero plane. Now, the great thing about a zero plane is it's an actual thing that you can use in your work if you want to. In this case, we're going to use it as a way to angle everything. So here's our zero plane. Now, nothing has changed in our 2D view. That's because it's been put on its own layer all by itself, and it's been turned off. So if we turn it on, you'll be able to see it. There it is right there, on and off. Okay, so we're going to leave it on. And because it's an actual component, we can select that and we can look at the component properties, and we have the tilt. So if we tilt this, and we project our tooling onto that tilted surface, then we're going to get that angle that we need to have our juice drain the proper way. So we're going to choose tilt, and we're going to set our 2 anchor points, one down here at the bottom and one at the very top. And then we're going to give it degrees, what we want to angle at. And so first of all, I'm going to do it, really kind of crazy. We're going to go 5%, and I'm going to go to my 3D view, and you'll see that, oh, sorry. Just need to, there's it there. Okay, so there is my angled plane, and you'll see it there. It's going from 0 up to 5 degrees at the top. And if we roll our mouse over it, you'll see that at the bottom here, you've got some Z height. So at the top, it's 1, and at the bottom, it is 0. Okay, that works pretty good. And there we go. So that's what we're going to use to do this with. Now, you can't really tell here what's going on, so we're going to change this. Well, actually, we're going to keep that the way it is, but I want to show you that we need to make sure that we change our actual model position here, because we're using some 3D content. So you'll see that there's a really, really huge light gray area and a little teeny weeny little dark area. And I think I can actually, for a better example, instead of using the 5, let's use 2. And that way we can see that better. 5 was a bit much. There we are. So there we can see that there's the gray area, and that, or the light brown area, and that represents our 3D components. We can move it to the top. And now you'll see that inside of our material block, here is deeper, and this end is at the very surface of our material. So that's great. That's what we want. Except for I'm not really confident in that angle, so, or that degree. So we're going to change this to be 0.5. I think that's way too aggressive. I don't need it that much. Actually, maybe we'll make it 1. We'll see in a second. So again, we're going to need to go ahead and make sure we put that where it needs to be at the top of our block. We'll close that down, click OK. We're not going to recalculate our toolpaths. We're going to leave it just the way it is. Because as I scroll over this, I want to show you that down here in the bottom, you'll see that now we have a negative height, Z height, and then at the top we get to 0. So right away, and this is important, that if you choose to use this option to tilt those channels, that right away, if you project a toolpath onto this, it's going to start at the bottom of our wedge. It's going to start already at almost a 1/4 inch deep to start with. So you need to keep that in mind so that and understand the how much cutting surface you have on your tools. You need to be really comfortable with your tools. Okay, so that's important to realize, and you'll see that in a second again when I show you. So let's leave that the way it is, and let's go and have a look at our tool paths again. So let's look at our channel toolpath. So right now it starts at 0 and it goes down to a 1/4 inch. Now if I turn on at the bottom here, project toolpath onto 3D model, and I pull this up, then you're going to see that you'll understand that here it's going to be 0, which is 0, but at the bottom it's actually going to be a 1/4 inch deeper than what you think it is. So let's just go ahead and make this 0.1. Okay, we're going to use that ball nose again. Do 2 passes. That's great. We're going to go on the line, and we're going to do the projection. We're going to calculate that. And let's just preview that visible toolpath, and you'll see now we get those angling down like we expected into the bottom here. So all we now need to do is to do the rest of our tooling, projected on the tooling that needs to be tilted, projected onto that 0 plane, and then all the juice will run down to where we want it to be. So let's close that. Let's go into our barbecue pocket. We're going to do the same thing again. We're going to leave that at 0. We're going to put 0.1. That's the same tool and everything. Everything's the same. We're going to project that onto there, and then we're going to calculate that, and we'll preview that visible toolpath. And again, it's tilted now on that surface, which is great. Same deal here. We're going to start at 0, go down 0.1. And we're going to project that, and we're going to calculate that. We'll preview that visible toolpath. And there we have it now. Now that's angled, just like it was mentioned earlier. Now it's angled now, so all that juice is going to run down into there, and it's going to be perfect. Now all of the other tool paths can stay exactly the same. They don't need to be projected onto there, so we can go ahead and preview all of those. And then we should, in the end, have a cutting board with angled channels in it. And we can delete this extra waste material, and then off we go, and we have that nice angled channel in there like we were talking about, which looks really good. Now, I want to go back to my thought again a second ago about being careful of how far it's going to project that onto there, and you're going to plunge in quite deep down here at the bottom. Okay, so I thought of that in the file that you're going to get. So we're going to stop at this file for a second, and I'm going to go to the file that you're going to receive with, if you choose to go to V&Co after this and download this free project and either cut it or change it, or cut it the way it is or change it, not cut it the way it is, but cut it with your own tools in there or change it to fit your needs. So first of all, it's going to pop up. It's going to give you these notes. Make sure you read and understand them. Okay, click OK. Bring up our toolpath, go to our 3D view, and let's just go ahead and look at this first one here. What I've decided to do was I'm clearing out some of this material ahead of time before we go in and do this channel, before we go ahead and do this pocket, not this one here, this pocket here. I'm worried that with this particular tool that I have in my tool database that it's going to be a little too much work for it. So I'm going to pocket a little bit out ahead of time so I don't need to worry about that. So that's why I left this in there. It's an optional toolpath, but it is one that I want you to be aware of when you look at it. You might want to use. And the same thing happens with these channels. You could easily run an end mill along there to clean some of that out ahead of time, or create some shorter vectors and clean out some of that before you go in and use your end mill in there. But again, that's up for you to decide when you actually do, if you cut this. So I'm going to turn these all on, and we'll just preview this again in the file that you're going to get. There's that initial sort of hogging out, if you will, and then I go in and I clean up everything else, and off we go. And that's the finished barbecue board there in the end. Now, I have to apologize. That took a lot longer than what I thought. Sorry, way longer than I thought. It's an extra half an hour on there, so I'm going to blast through this last little bit here. So first of all, we're going to review sort of what we've done here. So we started out with this oval cutting board using the Fluting Toolpath to do this with. I think that's really great for something like that. That's really kind of basic and so on. Along with, like I said, give you some other really cool examples of what you can use that Fluting Toolpath for. So, explore that a little bit if you want to and have some fun with it. And then we went ahead and I showed you how to use the angled zero plane to create the angled channels in this barbecue board. I know I'm going to cut one because I love the barbecue. I'm Canadian and I love that sort of thing. So definitely this is the way to go. And yeah, you're right. The interior of the bees will trap any. That's right, Michael. Exactly. So I could use the stencil option for that. But I didn't take the time to that because I kind of like it the way it looks right now. I thought kind of what trapped in there wouldn't matter, but you're right, you could do that. Thank you for that. So that's that. I'm pretty happy with that. So I think that's really great. So I hope that you enjoyed that. I hope you walk away with a few tips and tricks, at least about the Fluting Toolpath and using your angled plane. I used the angled plane, zero plane before for making a signet ring in VCarve desktop, which was kind of neat. So it is another use for lots of uses for that if you want to. Also, if you're going to make raised text using level clipping, you can use it for that too, which is kind of neat. But anyway, so that's that. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. We really appreciate that a lot. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Press the little bell there if you'd like to get notifications of any upcoming live events that we have going on. We really appreciate that a lot. If you have any comments or anything that we haven't got to, then please put them in the comments below and we will answer those. We really appreciate everybody coming along to these events. These are a lot of fun for us to do, and we appreciate you stopping by. I hope you guys are still having lots of fun out there. I know it's getting a little long in the tooth to be stuck at home. I hope you're still making something. And from all of us here at Vectric, I hope that you're all safe and really, really healthy, you and your family alike. Okay? Thanks again so much. And next week, Rebecca will be along with another live event for you. So tune in then, okay? Should be good. Bye-bye.